this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate two different approaches to creating a reversible edge using the long-tail cast-on. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. Here's a swatch that I cast on using the standard method of the long-tail cast-on. So I have on one face of the fabric, I have a smooth edge, and on this face of the fabric, I have a bumpy edge. And this is always what happens with the standard method of the long-tail cast-on. So if you have a project where you want the edge to be reversible, maybe both sides of the fabric will be showing, or you have a project say for a hat where you have the hat band knit extra long and you want to be able to flip that band back without the bumps showing like that. Maybe you want either side to be able to show and not have bumps on either side. Then you might want to cast on a reversible edge. So here are two swatches that I cast on using two different methods of creating a reversible edge. So if you look at the base of the knit stitches on the side of the fabric, you see that smooth kind of angled line that you normally see in the standard long-tail cast-on. But when we turn it over, what we see is we have the same thing at the base of those knit stitches. So this is why it's a reversible edge. There is no bumpy side to this cast-on. So this edge is similar, but not exactly the same. On this edge, you'll see that at the base of the knit stitches, you have that smooth angled edge that we've seen before. And on the second column of knit stitches, it's angled not quite as much to the right, and you can see that it doesn't actually go all the way to the edge. This one is coming all the way down to the edge and then wraps around the edge. And this one is a little more horizontal. It's angled, but not quite as much. And when we look at this side of the fabric, we see that the column of knit stitches on the left has a smooth angled strand that goes all the way down to the edge and wraps around. But notice that this one is going left. And then this one again is more horizontal, not quite going all the way down to the edge. These two edges are very similar to each other. They both create reversible edges, but they use different techniques to do so. To create this edge, which I call casting on in pattern, you can cast on using the English method of the long-tail cast-on or the Continental method where both strands are in your left hand. This method, where you have the strands at the base of the knit stitches angled to the right on one face of the fabric and angled to the left on the other. This one is called the alternating cast on, and it can be done only with both strands in the left hand. You wouldn't use this method if you use the English method of casting on for the long tail cast on with one strand in each hand. So let's go through each process. So for this demonstration, I'm going to cast on in knit 2, purl 2 pattern. So far, I've got 2 knits and 2 purls, and I'm ready to do 2 knits. So you use the standard method of casting on, the long tail cast on. And then when you're ready to do a purl, you move the yarn to the front, just as you would if you were purling in your fabric. And now you're going to enter through your thumb loop as if to purl, and then you're going to purl the stitch and pull it through. And then again, you enter the thumb loop, you wrap the yarn around for purling, and you pull the new stitch through the thumb loop and you release it. And now you're ready to do a knit. So you're going to move the yarn to the back as for knitting, and then you're going to continue on with your cast on. So every time you want to knit, you make sure that the yarn is in back. If you're going to do a purl cast on, then you moved the yarn to the front. The knit stitches are as you would always knit them through that thumb loop. Now comes the challenge. In order to purl through this thumb loop, the working yarn needs to be in front. So this is sort of like a needle. Your thumb is acting as a needle holding the twisted loops, and so the yarn needs to be in front. So It's not, I find this a little awkward, and so I have found other methods, but you may find it not too bad. So you have to move the yarn forward. You're bringing your needle underneath the working yarn and through the thumb loop. And then you have to pick the yarn and pull it through that thumb loop and then release it. So again, the working yarn has to be forward. You bring the needle under both strands. You have to catch the working yarn in order to bring it underneath and through that thumb. Again, I find this very awkward. You may find an easier way to do it that works for you. What I do instead is I use the Norwegian purl. So if you're not familiar with the Norwegian purl, I would practice just purling using the Norwegian purl on a swatch before you try doing it in a cast on. It's a little much to try to learn the Norwegian purl and learn how to cast on and pattern using it at the same time. So if you're familiar with the Norwegian purl, then you just bring your yarn under that yarn through here, grab the working yarn, and then bring it through. So you're doing a yarn over, inserting through the thumb loop, come around to grab the yarn, and bring it back through that thumb loop. Again, if you're not familiar with the Norwegian purl, I suggest you practice that first. The alternating cast on alternates between using the thumb, between knitting through the thumb and purling through the index finger yarn. So to knit, you work your regular knit stitch, going through the thumb loop and catching the working yarn to get your 2 knits. And now you're going to purl using the index finger yarn. Turn your hand toward you so that you can come from behind, so that you're entering a twisted loop here. You're going to come under your thumb yarn in order to pull through your index loop. And then you're going to tighten it up. Once again, you turn your hand to point at you so you can catch that index finger yarn from behind and you can see the twisted loop. You bring your working yarn or your working needle underneath the thumb yarn and then pull it back through the index finger loop. Take your finger out and tighten the strand up. So this is called the alternating cast on because the strand creating the edge alternates between being the index finger yarn and the thumb yarn. It's also why the loops at the edge twist in different directions. When I'm creating a twisted loop with the index finger yarn, the loop twists to the left. The stitch that's on top is the one that's going to the left. When I create the twisted loop with my thumb, it's twisting to the right. You can see the strand on top is twisting to the right. So that's what creates the different twists. And then the reason that the edge has an angled strand and then one that's a little more horizontal is because that's the point where you're switching between which yarn is being used to create the loops. So they don't, when you're getting ready to switch, the yarn that you're transitioning from doesn't wrap around the entire bottom of the edge. If you use the English method of the long tail cast on, your choice is simply whether or not you want a reversible edge, and therefore whether to cast on in the standard method or to cast on in pattern. If you use the Continental method for the long tail cast on, you can cast on in pattern or use the alternating cast on to create a reversible edge. You also have some choices as to which method of purling you want to use when casting on in pattern. Experiment with your choices in order to find the method that you prefer. Your preference may be based on which process you prefer, or it may be based on the results. My personal preference, which may not be yours, is casting on in pattern using the Norwegian purl. I have an easier time using the Norwegian purl than other methods of purling while casting on in pattern, and I prefer the results of casting on in pattern to the results of the alternating cast on because I get thrown by that slightly more horizontal edge strand that occurs before the transition from knitting through the thumb to purling through the index finger. Again, what works best for me may not be what works best for you. If you like my videos, you can support me by buying me a coffee on Ko-fi. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.